Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Please Donate the Sage, a podcast dedicated to demystifying mysticism. If you are a real-time listener, you might have noticed that last week we did not have a Tuesday episode as promised. And I blame Mercury retrograde, but also I got kidney stones at the end of the week. So while I intended for this episode to only be slightly delayed, it is now just pushed back for the next Tuesday time slot. But that's okay. It just means that we're going to extend this season 1 week longer. So as is our current theme, I am choosing a topic that we talk about with our guest and doing a solo episode to elaborate on something that I'm either experiencing in my own baby witch practice or that I can elaborate on from my seat of expertise as an intuitive coach, past life reader, and Reiki healer. And if you remember from 2 weeks ago, our interview with Catherine Budig, founder of House of Phoenix, included a little section where she and I bonded a bit over our recently passed familiars. And I said something to her during the interview that I thought I'd elaborate more on. I was talking about my messaging that I've received around reincarnation, and in particularly as it regards to pets. So for those of you that don't know, one of the many intuitive services that I offer is a past life reading. I call it a soul session. It's a combination of Akashic records and tarot and psychic mediumship in which I tap into a person's energy throughout all timelines, and I come up with the past life that is the most relevant for what they're currently going through in this lifetime. And through that, I do a lot of meditating on visualizing, contemplating reincarnation and past lives. Now, if you do not believe in past lives, that's totally fine. Maybe you skip this episode, or perhaps you look at this episode's information as a story, a metaphor for something that can be applied to your belief system. I like to tell all of my past life reading recipients at the very beginning of every session that I do that while I believe in past lives, I also believe that whatever information comes through when I give a past life reading is an archetype, a symbol of something that this person needs to find empowerment or to release old traumas in this lifetime. As a psychic reader, oftentimes, even when I'm not doing a past life reading, I'll get images or visuals or characters coming into my mind to help me translate the message that's supposed to come across. So if you believe in past lives, I believe that it is the image of a past life, either on this timeline or an alternate timeline from somewhere in the past. But if that is not something that resonates for you, it doesn't mean that the information isn't still applicable in some way to give you clarity, because that's ultimately what it's about. It's to bring clarity. That being said, I'm going to dive a little more into the logistics of what I see playing out in the storyline of many past lives. What I've been shown, and I don't think it's an unfamiliar concept in a lot of the New Age community, is that we all are part of an umbrella soul. And the umbrella soul is sort of just this trickle-down network of many, many, many different souls throughout history, throughout time, throughout space, throughout all kinds of different cosmic situations that share a similar life's purpose. They may show up in different ways, but there's a similar through line in regards to souls that share an umbrella soul. And that is where we get into the concept of soulmates. Usually, if you find someone that you resonate with, and whether you embark upon an actual project with them or you just come together and you have an emotional bond, it's because you share some sort of connection in that umbrella soul. You could be really far apart in that umbrella, or you could be really close together. But the point being, there's some sort of through line. There's some sort of connection that's just sort of like an umbrella overhead grouping you all together. So that's one of the concepts that goes into what I'm about to talk about, which is why I preface this story by saying that. The other concept, which I mention in Catherine's interview, is that I've been shown that reincarnation and past lives can come through in one of two different ways. So when I see it in my mind's eye, when I give these readings or I receive information in meditation regarding past lives, I see all of our souls as if it is a fabric. And if you look very closely at any fabric, it's a series of interwoven threads to make this whole complete unit. Well, our souls are very similar to that. Our souls are interwoven threads that incarnate on this earth in the formation of a complete piece of fabric. Now, when we end a chapter in our soul's journey, aka when we pass on from a certain life, we then potentially reincarnate. Not all souls choose to reincarnate, but if we choose to reincarnate, there's one of two ways that that comes through. The first, though it might be what most people think of as reincarnation, is the more rare type. It is when you take the complete fabric from one lifetime and you just transfer it over to another lifetime. And this is when we get very, very clear reincarnation signs. We get the images of celebrities that look like they're 100 years old because there's someone that looks exactly like them. Or we get children that incarnate on this earth with very clear images from their past life. There are other things that go into play in a situation like that in regards to the suddenness of the death in the previous life, but close memories are one of the indicators sometimes of a fully formed fabric just incarnating from a past life into this one. You don't always have memories of your past lives, so you can still be one of these types of incarnations if you don't remember your past life. But it's a little more rare for that to happen simply because when we go through one incarnation, when we go through one lifetime, we have a certain set journey and a certain amount of lessons that we learn during that lifetime that allow us to evolve. So there's usually not a lot of necessity for an exact replica soul to come through as the exact woven fabric as a previous lifetime, because through that previous lifetime, they've grown, they've shifted, they've changed, they've evolved, and they've become ready to integrate new ideas, new concepts, new soul threads. Which brings me to the second type of reincarnation. And that is the more common type, and it's also why it gets a little fuzzy when you start talking about past lives, because it's when a soul fabric is unraveled in between lifetimes and then interwoven with other soul threads. So you could get a soul that is just 2 to 3 threads from the previous lifetime, or you could get a soul that is like 75% of the threads from the previous lifetime, and then 25% of those threads are pulled from souls within the umbrella soul that you exist within. So you're still getting similar life missions, similar emotional connections, again, the type of energy that you would connect to as a soulmate or a friend in a lifetime, and that is being interwoven into this new soul. And oftentimes that is how we get an upgrade from lifetime to lifetime, because we are taking what we knew from that previous life, but we're getting this new soul information, and it's still connected to our general life purpose, but it's from maybe a higher level soul. They were a little higher up on the umbrella totem pole. And that makes the next lifetime different than the previous one, which is what we want, because why would we want to just keep repeating the same thing over and over again? There's a reason that they make movies about things like Groundhog Day, because repeating the same thing over and over again is not often a pleasant experience. So we upgrade, we integrate, we evolve in between lives so that the next lifetime can be at least slightly different and hopefully a little higher level experience. So now that we've got that baseline of information, we can move into the topic that was the reason that this information came forward in Catherine's interview, which is pet reincarnation. And Catherine mentioned that she had gone to a medium that had said that her dog Ashi, who had passed, was not going to reincarnate, that her dog would better serve her on the other side as sort of a guide. And that is often true with our past pets. However, what I've been shown that's different from what a lot of pet mediums say, because I hear that a lot. When I watch videos from pet communicators, a lot of times they will say that the pet doesn't choose to reincarnate because they want to serve you from the other side. But if we integrate in the theory that I've been shown about past lives, which is about the threads, you can have your pet almost fully reincarnate and still have a portion of it on the other side. And this becomes a little heady for a lot of people to conceptualize, because when we get into these higher level spiritual topics, we can't think linearly. We have to think in an energetic way. And energy can do just about anything. So you have to kind of blur the lines that it has to be one thing or another. It can be both. And honestly, even this explanation is a little more 3D than what it probably actually is, because I am incarnated here on an earthly plane trying to translate these higher level concepts. And I think that this is the best that I can come up with to wrap our earthly minds around it. So I mentioned in the episode with Catherine that I believe that one of my kittens that I've recently adopted is like 75 to 80% of the threads of my previous cat that passed on. However, I can still feel her presence on the other side because she's still 20 to 25% in spirit being a guide for me and watching over me and these new kittens that I've adopted. And there's also other situations that could come into play when it comes to adopting a new pet after a previous pet has passed, and that maybe the pet doesn't reincarnate at all, but it can communicate to you through your new pets. And honestly, I'm not here to tell you which one is which, because you are going to be the best gauge for your particular pet's energy. And that's going to be a controversial opinion because a lot of times when we lose a pet, we're grieving, we want to reach for something that feels comforting. And quite frankly, I don't see any problem with that. You may decide that your pet has been reincarnated in this new pet, and over time you might decide that maybe you were wrong, but you needed that realization, that thought process to get through your grief, to comfort yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, you also are the one that knows your past pet the best. You are the most familiar with what that energy signature feels like. So while you can definitely go to mediums and ask their opinion on things, I would say take it with a grain of salt. And quite frankly, take any psychic's opinion with a grain of salt, because this is a topic that's for another podcast, but I am a big believer of promoting the fact that every psychic has their own influence on a reading. So that's why it's so important that you go to a reader that resonates for you, that you feel a connection with, because that means that you have some soul threads that are interwoven, and they're going to be able to translate a message closer to the way that you yourself would translate it. Point being, if you go to a psychic communicator, if you go to a medium, if you go to a pet communicator, and you want to know about your past pet, and you want to know if they've reincarnated or if they're going to reincarnate, definitely take in what they tell you, because sometimes it is information that will resonate down the line whenever you're not so steeped in grief. But also listen to your own intuition, because you know your pet best. And when you see a new animal do something that feels like a sign from your pet, you can choose to believe that that is your pet communicating to you through this animal, or you can choose to believe that there are at least a few threads of that passed on pet that got interwoven into this new experience. And either one is beautiful. So thank you for your patience in waiting for this week's episode. We should be resuming our regular scheduling from here on out until mid to late October, where we have an episode every Tuesday and every other Thursday, a bonus Total Betty card reading with our guests. On that note, the Total Betty Goddess deck is almost to the end of its IndieGogo campaign. At the time of this episode's posting, it is the last day of this IndieGogo campaign. You can still get the deck after this, but this is going to be the cheapest that you will be able to get it during this first printing. Head over to tinyurl.com/TotalBetty to pick up your copy through the IndieGogo at the lowest possible price. And if you're listening to this after that date, you can still pre-order over on michelleshewalker.com/shop. And if you are interested in a past life reading or psychic mediumship reading, that is my soul session offering over at michelleshewalker.com. This episode of Please Don't Eat the Sage was brought to you in part by my Patreon members. So I'd like to thank Ashley, Laura, Caitlin, Amanda, and Karen. If you'd like to join their ranks, you can do so over at patreon.com/Michelle Shea. You can also support this podcast by pre-ordering your own copy of the Total Betty Goddess deck, or head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review.